The message was not long, but it was enough to kill a marriage. At 6:12 in the morning, in the gray stone kitchen of the house in northern Atlanta, Nathan Pierce stood perfectly still. The blue glow from the phone screen washed over his face, sharpening his jawline and darkening his eyes with every passing second. Room 907 at the Meridian. Wear the black lace he loves. Do not forget the perfume that idiot bought you. The idiot was him. Nathan did not drop his coffee. He did not swear. He did not clench his fists. The 43-year-old man simply drew in a slow, steady breath, the kind he took before stepping into a boardroom where millions of dollars were about to be saved or erased. Upstairs, Mia Pierce was in the shower, humming a familiar pop song. Her voice sounded light and careless, as if life was still perfect, as if the man downstairs was still her unquestioned foundation, as if the message did not exist. Nathan looked at the screen once more, took a photo with his own phone, then placed her iPhone back at the exact same angle, precise down to the millimeter. It was a professional reflex. He was a crisis management consultant for major corporations. When everything was about to explode, they called him. He did not panic. He sealed vulnerabilities, and this morning he had just discovered the largest vulnerability of his life. Mia came downstairs 15 minutes later, her hair still damp, wrapped in a white silk robe. The scent of body wash and perfume blended into something seductive and painfully familiar. She kissed his cheek lightly. "You are up early." Nathan smiled the same smile he used when negotiating with people who wanted to swallow his clients whole. "I could not sleep. You have that meeting with the New York clients today, right?" Mia blinked just for a fraction of a second, then nodded smoothly. "Yes, I might be home late. Do not wait for dinner." In her mind, Nathan was still the predictable, overworked husband stable, but dull, a polite machine that printed money. She believed he would never check, never suspect, never confront. She had underestimated him. When the silver SUV rolled out through the gates, Nathan stood by the window. A thin rain began to fall across the Atlanta sky. November here was always damp and cold. He did not feel pain in the way people usually described it. There was no tidal wave of emotion, only a sharp, controlled stillness spreading through his chest, like the moment before activating a strategic operation. In the living room, their wedding photos still smiled down from the wall. Mia in white, Nathan in black, her eyes soft that day, or at least he had believed they were. In the drawer of the dining table lay the prenuptial agreement they had signed 10 years earlier. Mia had signed it while in love, saying she trusted him, saying she did not need to read it carefully. Nathan remembered every clause, especially the adultery provision. He returned to the kitchen. The coffee had gone cold. He took a long swallow, bitterness burning down his throat, then set the cup aside and pulled out his phone. His voice was low and steady when he made the first call. "Hugo, I need a full review of transaction history and cloud backups. Legal clean. I want evidence, not emotion." On the other end, Hugo paused. He understood. Nathan did not call to complain. The second call went to Renee, a financial forensic specialist. The third, to Elliot Graves, a divorce lawyer known for never losing in court. Nathan did not say his wife was cheating. He did not use the word betrayal. He said only one sentence: "I need to protect my assets and my reputation immediately." Upstairs, Mia stood in front of the mirror, choosing a pair of black heels. In her mind, today was simply a secret rendezvous in a luxurious hotel room. She believed she was in control. She believed she was clever. She did not know that at 6:12 that morning, her marriage had shifted from an emotional story into a hostile takeover. Nathan stood alone in the wide kitchen, his gaze deep and unreadable. People had said he was too cold, too rational, not romantic enough. Some had whispered that Mia deserved a stronger, more passionate man. They did not know. Nathan was not the man who burned hot. He was the man who put out fires. And when his own life caught fire, he would not cry. He would control the flames. War does not begin with gunshots. It begins with a message. At 6:12 in the morning, Nathan Pierce had read the verdict of his marriage, and he chose not to be a victim. He chose to be the one who enforced it. By 11:38 in the morning, Nathan knew his wife was not just having an affair. She was preparing to disappear. His office sat on the 32nd floor of a glass tower overlooking downtown Atlanta. Outside, the city buzzed with confidence as if nothing could ever shake it. Inside, Nathan pulled the blinds shut, locked the door, and silenced his personal phone. He did not want daylight. He wanted focus. 3 monitors glowed in front of him, like 3 doors opening into another world, one Mia had never believed he was sharp enough to enter. Hugo sent the first data package. Location history login records, cloud backups all gathered legally, all clean, all immune to challenge in court. Renee followed with an analysis of their joint accounts. Numbers flowed across the screen meaningless to most people, but to Nathan, they read like a confession. In the upper corner of the second monitor, a secondary account appeared. Its name was simple and final, like a farewell. Exit Fund. $38,500 had been transferred into it over the past 8 months. Small amounts at a time, subtle enough to avoid detection, steady enough to build an escape. Nathan did not move, but something inside his chest fractured and sealed itself instantly, like a steel vault door slamming shut. She was not only betraying him, she was planning. Renee called her voice quiet, but precise. Mia used her company card for several client entertainment expenses. The timestamps match nights at the Meridian. There are signs of expense fraud. If the company audits, she could face an internal investigation. Nathan remained silent for a few seconds. He had never imagined his wife would risk her career to sustain an affair. Across the city, Mia sat in a cafe scrolling through her phone. She texted Grant Hale, the man 6'3", with muscles photographed more often than worked for. She believed she controlled everything. She believed Nathan was too busy, too confident, too cold to notice. She had never seen him in his true role. Grant Hale was not the successful entrepreneur he marketed online. The financial profile Hugo uncovered showed irregular cash flow at his gym. Numerous cash payments that did not match the books, signs of tax evasion, possible money laundering through premium membership packages. Nathan studied Grant's profile photo, the confident smile, the sunglasses catching the light. A man accustomed to being forgiven because of looks and smooth words. A man who believed he could take another man's wife without consequence. Elliot Graves appeared on a video call, gray suit, immaculate eyes alert. "Do you have proof of infidelity?" Nathan nodded. "We have location data, hotel receipts, secret transfers, and the adultery clause in the prenuptial agreement." Elliot tilted his head. "If we prove marital funds were used for the affair, the clause will be fully enforceable. She will lose claims to assets accumulated during the marriage." Nathan understood that better than anyone. The prenuptial agreement was not a romantic gesture from their engagement days. It was a steel wall he had built while in love. And now it was about to become a weapon. In a small conference room down the hall, a group of young employees whispered about Nathan Pierce. They always thought he was too strict, too cold a boss who never truly smiled. They did not know that the same cold discipline was keeping him from collapsing. Hugo sent another message. Hotel reservations booked before Mia lied about visiting her mother in Savannah. Photos of the two of them entering the same elevator timestamps aligned to the minute. Nathan leaned back in his chair. The white ceiling above offered no answers, but he was not looking for answers. He was looking for weaknesses. He was not angry that Mia loved another man. He was angry that she believed she could do it without being discovered. She had assessed him as a man easy to deceive. Her greatest mistake was forgetting what her husband did for a living. Nathan stood and walked to the window. The city below continued to move, cars flowing like blood through concrete arteries. In his mind, the pieces locked into place. The secret account, the expense fraud, a lover with tax issues, the adultery clause, reputation. This was no longer a matter of emotion. This was structure. And Nathan Pierce was a man who designed collapses. He tapped the final number in his contacts. "I want to speak with Grant Hale's wife," he said calmly, as if scheduling a business meeting. On the other end, the assistant hesitated. "Are you certain, sir?" Nathan looked down at the city once more. Completely. The war did not begin with gunfire. It began with truth placed in the correct order. And Nathan was ready to arrange it. The woman Nathan was about to meet was not weak, and the moment she finished reading the file on the table, the lives of 2 betrayers began their countdown. At 4:25 in the afternoon, inside a glass office overlooking upscale Buckhead, Eleanor Hale sat upright behind her desk. She was 37 years old, her brown hair cut short and precise, her eyes sharp and alert, with the focus of someone accustomed to reading financial reports rather than love letters. Officially, Grant Hale was the face of the luxury gym chain. On the legal documents, however, Eleanor was the co-founder and chief financial officer. She signed the contracts. She carried the liability. Grant was simply the spotlight. Nathan walked into the meeting room without anger. He carried a brown folder and a composure so steady it made the air feel heavier. People had always said he was too cold, too rigid, a difficult man to love. They did not understand that this coldness was exactly what made him dangerous. Eleanor studied him carefully. "I was told you wanted to discuss something involving my husband." Nathan placed the folder on the table. "No apology. No hesitation. Your husband is sleeping with my wife, but that is not the biggest problem." The room fell silent for 2 heartbeats. Beyond the glass walls, the city continued to glitter, as if nothing had just collapsed. Eleanor did not slam the table. She did not scream. She opened the file. The first page contained hotel booking records. The second showed transfers from Nathan's joint account into the exit fund. The third displayed corporate credit card statements used by Grant to pay for hotel rooms, gifts, and extravagant dinners. The fourth page held her attention longer. A financial flow analysis of the gym chain. Cash payments that did not reconcile. Revenues rounded too cleanly. Signs of tax evasion. Eleanor looked up. "You are telling me Grant is not only cheating, he may be involved in financial fraud." Nathan nodded. "I am telling you he used your company's money to fund his affair, and there are indicators he may be concealing income." Eleanor's eyes darkened not from jealousy, but from betrayal. In her mind, years of building the business replayed like a film in fast forward. The nights she worked until 2 in the morning. The mortgage she risked to open a new location. Grant standing before cameras smiling, talking about vision and passion. She had believed she was the intelligent one. She, too, had been underestimated. Nathan watched her closely. He was not seeking sympathy. He was identifying a strategic partner. "I did not come here to destroy him out of jealousy," he said. "I came because the structure is cracking. If you do not act when tax authorities investigate, your name will be there too." Eleanor understood immediately. On paper, she carried ultimate responsibility. The room grew heavier. 2 strangers sat across from each other, both realizing they had loved the wrong person, yet instead of collapsing, they were calculating. Eleanor closed the folder. "What do you want?" Nathan answered without hesitation. "A simultaneous strike. I file for divorce and activate the adultery clause in my prenuptial agreement. You initiate an internal audit and report suspicious transactions. When we move, they will not have time to warn each other." Eleanor looked directly into his eyes. She had heard Mia's friends describe Nathan as the dry husband who only cared about work. She had assumed he would be the weakest player in this story. The man sitting before her was anything but weak. He was calm in the way of someone who had absorbed pain and converted it into strategy. "Grant believes he is clever," Elena said slowly. "He believes I would never scrutinize the books. He believes I trust too easily." "Mia believed I would never check her phone," Nathan replied. For a brief moment they both smiled, not from joy, not from relief. It was the cold recognition of two people who had just seen the truth. Elena stood and extended her hand. 3 days. Nathan shook it firmly. 3 days. When he stepped out of the building, Atlanta rain began to fall, each drop striking the pavement like a small period at the end of a sentence. Somewhere else in the city, Mia was leaning against Grant in a hotel room, convinced she was writing a secret love story. Grant whispered about the future, about freedom, about a new life. Neither of them realized that future had already been signed away in a glass office by two people who now held their fate. Nathan paused beneath the awning, watching traffic stream by. He no longer felt like the victim of a cheating wife. He was no longer merely the betrayed husband. He was the orchestrator, and with every piece now placed on the board, the game was simply waiting to begin. Grant Hale was never the one controlling the game. He was simply a polished chess piece. 3 days after the meeting in the glass office at 2:12 in the afternoon, Elena sat in the internal conference room with a thick file in front of her. She was no longer the betrayed wife. She was the chief financial officer, and today she acted in that role. Grant walked in with his usual confident smile. He assumed this was a strategy session about expanding another branch. He did not know that 2 independent auditors were seated at the end of the table, silent and sharp. Elena did not waste time. "I need an explanation for the cash discrepancies over the past 6 months." Grant paused for a fraction of a second, small but revealing. He laughed it off, talking about accounting errors, careless data entry, the chaos of rapid growth. The smooth words that once charmed investors now sounded thin and soaked through. Elena placed the financial analysis in front of him, figures circled in red timelines matching the nights he spent at the Meridian with Mia. The air in the room thickened. Grant began to understand. At the same time, across the city in the real estate firm where Mia worked, Human Resources received an internal legal memo detailing questionable entertainment expenses, hotel invoices, matching days. She had reported client meetings, restaurant receipts exceeding policy limits. At 2:20 in the afternoon, Mia was invited into a conference room. She walked in with her usual confidence hair, perfectly styled dress, fitted and immaculate, the image of control she always believed she maintained. She thought this was routine. She thought she could always pivot. She did not know that Nathan had calculated every move. Back in his office, Nathan stood by the window, watching gray clouds drift slowly across the Atlanta sky. His phone rested on the desk, lighting up periodically, like a pulse marking the progress of a campaign. At 2:25, Elliot sent a short message. Divorce petition filed. Adultery clause activated. At 2:30, Renee confirmed the joint accounts had been legally requested to be temporarily frozen. Nathan did not smile. He exhaled slowly, not from satisfaction, but from precision. In the company conference room, the head of Human Resources slid a folder toward Mia. "We need you to explain these transactions." Mia scanned the pages. The color drained from her face in seconds. She began speaking quickly, blaming clerical mistakes last minute, client dinners, pressure to close deals. Then her phone vibrated. A notification from the bank. Card temporarily suspended. Her heart pounded. She instinctively dialed Nathan. No connection. In the gym company meeting room, Grant stood to leave, only to be informed by the auditors that the entire system would undergo immediate review and that documentation would be forwarded to tax authorities if irregularities were confirmed. He turned to Elena. For the first time, he did not see the familiar, accommodating wife. He saw an adversary. "What are you doing?" Grant demanded. "I am protecting my company," Elena replied calmly. At that same moment, Nathan received a call from Hugo. "The operation is proceeding exactly as planned." Nathan glanced at his reflection in the darkened screen. People had always said he was dull, too focused on work, not strong enough to keep a woman like Mia. They did not understand. He did not hold anyone with sweet words. He held with structure, contracts, strategy. At 3:15 in the afternoon, Mia was asked to surrender her company laptop for internal review. She sat motionless in the conference room, hands trembling slightly under the table. In her mind, Grant's promises of freedom and a future together began to fracture. She realized something too late. Nathan had never been weak. He had simply been silent. And when he acted, everything happened at once. No time to pivot. No space to escape. At 4 in the afternoon, Elena signed the official audit authorization. Grant stared at her signature as if it were a sentence suspended over his head. In his high-rise office, Nathan closed his laptop. The campaign was not finished, but today the balance had shifted, and for the first time since 6:12 in the morning, 3 days earlier, he did not feel pain. He felt control. 3 days after everything began to collapse, Grant Hale appeared outside Nathan's office building with the face of a man who had just lost everything. He was no longer the confident figure from gym advertisements, no longer the man with the shining eyes of someone used to admiration. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his breathing heavy. His reputation was slipping through his fingers like wet sand. In those 3 days, the internal audit had uncovered unreported cash revenue. The tax authorities had sent a formal request for clarification. Investors had begun calling non-stop. Elena had filed for divorce and requested that Grant's access to the company's financial systems be frozen. Grant believed he still had one card left to play. Nathan. The underground parking garage was dim footsteps, echoing against concrete. At 7:15 in the evening, when most employees had gone home, Nathan stepped out of the elevator with a briefcase in his hand. He knew Grant was waiting. He knew because Hugo had warned him earlier. Grant moved toward him, eyes bloodshot. "You destroyed my life." Nathan stopped. He did not step back. He did not rush. "Your life destroyed itself," Nathan said calmly, as if analyzing a flawed report. Grant lunged forward, fists clenched. He was taller, bigger, a man who once believed muscle equaled power. But Nathan was not unprepared. For years, every morning at 6, he had trained in a small boxing gym near his house, not to boast, but for discipline. Grant's punch was slow and obvious. Nathan shifted his body cleanly, evaded, stepped inside the range, and delivered a short hook to the liver. Grant folded, unable to breathe, a broken sound escaping his throat, a mixture of rage and panic. Nathan bent slightly, his voice low and sharp. "This is the only time I will warn you. Stay away from me and from my property. If you come near again, I will not only provide evidence of financial fraud. I will look into everything else you are hiding." It was not an empty threat. Hugo had uncovered signs of other questionable transactions, not enough to conclude, but enough to suggest. Grant understood. His eyes shifted from fury to fear. The alpha facade peeled away. Beneath it was simply a panicked man watching fabricated power vanish. Nathan straightened, adjusted his cuff, and walked away, as if he had just concluded a business meeting. Across the city, Mia sat alone in the living room of the large house. The joint accounts were temporarily frozen. Her company laptop had been confiscated. Grant's phone was unusually silent. She began calling friends. One did not answer. Another responded coldly. A third said she was busy, and would call back. No one called back. Rumors spread through elite social circles faster than any press release. One sentence was enough to ignite it. That evening at the annual poker night at the private club, when someone asked where Mia was, Nathan simply shrugged. She decided to invest in a different dream with our shared money. Unfortunately, that dream was audited. The table went silent for 2 seconds. That was enough. In their world, reputation was not killed by gunfire. It was suffocated. Mia sat in the living room staring at the wall where their wedding photo once hung. She did not yet know exactly how much the adultery clause in the prenuptial agreement would cost her, but she was beginning to understand that Nathan was not weak the way she had believed. She once thought she controlled the narrative. She was wrong. Nathan returned home, late. He said nothing. He did not interrogate her. He placed his keys on the table, poured a glass of water, and looked around the silent room. He did not feel triumph, only a cold certainty. Those who once labeled him a dull husband too focused on work were beginning to understand. He did not need to shout to assert power. He only needed to act. Grant was facing audits and potential tax investigation. Mia was facing internal review and a divorce filing. Elena was restructuring her company. And Nathan, the man assumed to be the weakest, betrayed husband in the story, was the only one standing steady. Not because he did not feel pain, but because he transformed pain into structure. And structure, when built correctly, does not collapse under emotion. That night, for the first time, Mia slept in the living room of her own house, and she understood, even though no one had said it out loud, that the door to the master bedroom had closed forever. Rain fell slowly and heavily against the Atlanta roof. The clock read 11:42 at night. Nathan stood by the window, his hand resting lightly against the cold glass, watching streetlights ripple across the wet pavement. Behind him, the large house was so silent, he could hear the faint rhythm of the woman who used to be his wife breathing. Mia did not scream or sob hysterically. She sat upright on the sofa, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had never imagined herself in this position. In her mind, Nathan should have been shouting, begging, losing control. He did none of that, and that silence frightened her more than any outburst could have. Nathan turned and walked slowly into the living room. He did not look at her right away. He placed a thick envelope on the coffee table with the precision of a man presenting documents to a board of directors. "This is a summary of the divorce terms," he said, his voice calm and level. Mia swallowed. She opened the envelope and scanned the pages under the warm light. The adultery clause in the prenuptial agreement had been activated. The use of marital assets to support the affair was classified as a serious violation. She would forfeit her rights to the assets accumulated during the marriage. Her eyes moved over words she had signed 10 years earlier, with a romantic smile and 3 glasses of champagne in her system. Back then, she believed the agreement was merely a formality, a gesture to reassure an overly cautious man. She had not read it carefully. Now every sentence cut like a blade. "You cannot do this to me," Mia whispered, her voice breaking at the end. Nathan looked at her, not angry, not mocking, simply steady in a way that felt merciless. "I am not doing anything. You did." The sentence was short and firm enough to silence any attempt at justification. In Mia's mind, memories of laughing evenings with Grant overlapped with images of frozen accounts, a phone that no longer rang friends who had gone quiet. She had once believed she was clever, that she deserved more passion. Now she realized she had traded stability for illusion. Nathan sat down across from her. The distance between them was less than 2 meters, yet it felt like 2 separate worlds. "You have 7 days to collect personal belongings you brought into the marriage, and anything I designate," he said. If you contest this, we go to court, and I will submit every piece of evidence regarding the misuse of marital assets. She stared at him as if he were a stranger. You have changed. Nathan shook his head slightly. No, I have always been this way. You just never looked closely. That was the twist Mia had never prepared for. The man she considered dull and predictable had anticipated the possibility of betrayal from the day they signed the prenuptial agreement. He loved, but he was never blind. She stood, walked a few steps toward the staircase, then paused. Did you ever love me? Nathan did not answer immediately. For a rare moment his eyes darkened. There were memories there. There was loss. I loved the woman who believed marriage was a commitment, not an exit strategy. Mia turned and climbed the stairs, each footstep echoing through the house like a countdown. Nathan remained seated, listening to the guest room door close. He did not feel victorious or triumphant. Only the clarity of an ending taking shape as precisely as a signed contract. In this city, people often confuse silence with weakness, discipline with boredom, stability with a lack of passion. Mia had been wrong. She underestimated a man who spent his career managing crises for others, forgetting that he could manage a crisis in his own home. That night, Nathan did not go to bed immediately. He sat in the living room a while longer, listening to the rain, thinking about what had been lost and what remained. He had lost a wife, but he had kept himself, and sometimes in a war, that is the only victory that matters. On the morning of the 5th day, Nathan placed Mia's 2 suitcases outside on the front porch while she was still in the shower. No warning, no formal announcement, just action. The Atlanta sky was gray and damp, a light drizzle falling as if the city were witnessing a farewell without music. Nathan stood in the foyer, holding the final version of the divorce agreement revised by Elliot. Every clause was clear. No loopholes, no gray areas. Mia came down the stairs with her hair still wet. She saw the front door slightly open and the 2 suitcases sitting outside, rain beginning to seep into the fabric. She froze. What are you doing? Nathan did not raise his voice. His tone was low and decisive. The deadline starts today. Over the past 5 days, Mia had tried everything. She cooked elaborate dinners like she had in the early days of their marriage. She wore dresses that once made Nathan pause a second longer. She cried at strategic moments. She lashed out to provoke a reaction. Nathan did not respond. He woke at 6 every morning, ran through the rain, returned with steady breathing and an unmoved expression. He worked in his home office, took calls, reorganized financial records, updated beneficiary lists for insurance policies. Strategic indifference. It wounded Mia more deeply than accusations ever could. Now seeing her suitcases outside, she understood this was no longer a threat. It was enforcement. I have nowhere to go, she said, her voice trembling but controlled. My mother will not take me back. Grant is under investigation. My accounts are frozen. Nathan looked at her the way one looks at an objective fact. You are 34 years old. You have a degree. You have work experience. The world does not pay for mistakes, but it does not close its doors to those who take responsibility. She stepped down toward the porch and stared at the 2 suitcases, as if they were the remainder of her life. She once imagined she would leave this house with her head high in a new car with a romantic story. She was leaving with 2 suitcases and silence. Will you ever forgive me? The question was not shouted. It was whispered, fragile like the last thread binding them together. Nathan remained quiet for a few seconds. No, he said. I will forget you. The answer was short, cold, exact. To Mia, being forgotten was more terrifying than being hated. Hatred meant she still existed in his mind. Being forgotten meant she was erased. She stood there a few seconds longer, waiting for something to change. A step forward. A touch. Nothing happened. Nathan moved to the door and opened it wider, creating space. When she pulled the suitcase down the steps, the wheels rolled through a shallow puddle, the small sound echoing in her chest, like something breaking. A rideshare car stopped at the gate. The driver had no idea he was picking up a life that had just collapsed. Mia turned back one last time. The house stood tall and quiet. Nathan stood in the doorway, not angry, not sympathetic, simply a man who had made a decision and would not retreat. She once believed he was not strong enough to keep her. She failed to understand he did not need to keep her. He only needed to let go. The car pulled away into the thin rain. The automatic gate closed with the metallic finality of a period at the end of a sentence. Nathan stood still for a moment listening as the engine faded into the distance. No background music, no Hollywood climax, just silence. He closed the door, locked it, and stepped back inside. The living room felt emptier but lighter. No phone vibrating in the night, no lies lingering in the air. He walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, set it down on the stone counter where everything had begun at 6:12 in the morning, days earlier. He did not feel victorious. He felt clean. People once thought Nathan Pierce was simply a stable husband, too rational, not romantic enough. They believed he would collapse when he lost the beautiful and captivating woman. They were wrong. He did not collapse. He restructured. And when a structure is redesigned from its foundation, it no longer depends on what has left. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside, the air was strangely peaceful. Nathan sat down and, for the first time in days, closed his eyes. He had not lost everything. He had only removed what no longer belonged to him. And sometimes that is the only way to begin again. 6 weeks later, Mia signed the divorce papers without a lawyer beside her, and that was not even her greatest loss. The family courthouse in downtown Atlanta was brightly lit. The courtroom was so quiet that the faint rustle of paper could be heard. Mia sat at one side of the table in a light gray coat, her face visibly thinner. No flawless makeup, no trace of the confidence of the woman who once believed she controlled everything. Across from her, Nathan did not look at her for long. He focused on the file. Every clause had been reviewed, revised, finalized. Eleanor had completed her part. Grant was facing a formal tax investigation. Several investors had withdrawn. One gym branch had closed. He no longer appeared on social media posting about success. The game was over. The judge read the final terms. Mia heard her name echo through the room, yet it felt as though it belonged to someone else. The woman who signed the prenuptial agreement 10 years earlier no longer existed. She signed. The pen touched the paper with a small but decisive sound. Nathan signed immediately after without hesitation. When they stood, there was no final glance, no dramatic scene, just two people walking in opposite directions down a long hallway under white lights. For Mia, that hallway felt endless. Each step echoed like a reminder of the choices that had brought her there. She once believed divorce would open the door to greater passion, to a brighter life. Reality was a studio apartment in Charlotte, a sales job at a furniture store, and an aging car with over 100,000 miles. She did not tell anyone that. As for Nathan, when he stepped outside the courthouse, he drew a deep breath, not to celebrate victory, but to confirm that he was still standing. In the weeks that followed, he began rebuilding methodically. The master bedroom was completely renovated. New paint, new furniture, no trace of old memories. He changed clubs and joined a sailing group he had once wanted to try, but Mia had called boring. He did not run from the past. He restructured it. Friends gradually stopped mentioning Mia when they realized Nathan never commented. No bitterness, no mockery. His silence allowed the story to fade on its own. People began to see him differently. No longer the betrayed husband, no longer the man left behind. He became an example, an example of someone who refused to let betrayal define him. 3 years passed. On an autumn evening in a quiet suburban home, Nathan stood beside another woman, Claire Vaughn, owner of a commercial design firm, independent and direct. On their third date, he had told her the entire story about Mia. Claire did not pity him. She was not afraid. She simply said, "Clear boundaries do not weaken love. They make it safer." They signed a new prenuptial agreement before holding a small wedding with 50 guests. No extravagance, no spectacle, just two people fully aware of what they were entering. Some nights Nathan stood by the window of their new home, watching the rain fall. He would remember that morning at 6:12 when the first message appeared. He could have chosen forgiveness. He could have chosen negotiation. He could have chosen a slower, more painful path. He chose differently. Not because he was cruel, but because he understood that a contract is a commitment, and when a commitment is broken, the consequence is not revenge, it is enforcement. Mia might tell a different story about him, might call him cold, unforgiving. But deep down, she knew everything that happened stemmed from her own choices. Nathan did not follow her life. He did not seek updates. He did not need to know whether she was happy or regretful. He did not live in the past. He lived in the new structure he had built. The night settled peacefully. No unexpected phone vibrations. No suspicion hanging in the air. Nathan sat down, warm light filling the room. He did not win because someone else lost. He won because he did not lose himself, and that was the only victory he ever needed. 3 months after the divorce, an envelope with no return address appeared at Nathan's front door. Inside was only an old photograph and a single handwritten line, shaky and uneven. "Do you ever regret it?" The photograph was from their wedding day. Mia in a white dress, Nathan in a black suit, their eyes untouched by ambition and illusion. The ink on the paper had slightly blurred, as if stained by rain or tears. Nathan stood in the kitchen, where everything had once begun, at 6:12 in the morning. The late afternoon light slanted through the window, casting a pale golden wash over the image like memory itself. He did not tear it. He did not keep it. He placed it on the stone counter, looked at it for a long moment, then slid it into a drawer with documents that had already been closed. In another city, Mia sat in a small third-floor apartment, the cold fluorescent light reflecting off bare walls. She had sent that photograph in a moment of weakness, when loneliness felt too loud to ignore. The sales job was not terrible, but it was not a dream. The quiet evenings stretched longer than she had expected. She wondered whether Nathan ever regretted anything, whether he ever remembered her as something other than a strategic mistake. She did not know that on the other side, Nathan did not regret his actions. He regretted only one thing, that he had not seen the fractures sooner. 3 months was not long enough to heal completely, but it was enough for a new structure to begin settling into place. In his office, Nathan had just finished negotiating a corporate rescue, guiding a company away from internal scandal. Partners shook his hand with genuine respect. They knew he was the most precise crisis strategist in the industry. They did not know he had handled his own personal crisis with the same discipline. At a business gathering one evening, someone asked him, "If you could go back, would you do anything differently?" Nathan looked at the glass of red wine in his hand, the dark liquid swirling as he rotated his wrist. "I would pay attention sooner," he said. "But I would not change my decision. It was not bravado. It was truth." Deep down he understood that forgiveness is not always the noblest solution. Sometimes mercy only prolongs decay. In Charlotte, Mia began hearing about Nathan's new life. Mutual acquaintances mentioned that he had remarried, that he seemed more composed than ever, that he and Claire appeared at charity events as a steady, confident couple. She pretended not to care. Yet every time her phone screen lit up with a social media image, Her chest tightened. She once believed Nathan would never love anyone after her. She once believed she was the defining chapter of his life. The twist she had never prepared for was this. She was only a chapter. Nathan did not build his life around a person. He built it around principles. One evening, sitting alone on her small balcony, Mia realized that what hurt most was not losing money or the house. It was losing her place in his story. On the other side of the country, Nathan stood in a room completely redesigned, studying the artwork Claire had chosen for the walls. No trace of the past, no wedding photograph in sight. He remembered the first morning after Mia left the silence, when he woke the mixture of relief and emptiness. From everything that happened, he learned one truth. Strength is not about holding someone at any cost. It is about being willing to let go when respect disappears. 3 months later, Nathan no longer saw himself as the victim of a cheating wife. He was no longer the betrayed husband. He was the man who chose how to respond. In a world where people often collapse under emotion, that choice made the difference. The photograph in the drawer would fade with time, but the decision he made would not. He did not act to prove he was right. He acted to protect his own structure. And when that structure is solid, the storms outside become nothing more than rain tapping lightly on the roof. Grant showed up at Nathan's office on a rainy afternoon, his face hollow, his eyes bloodshot like a man who had run out of exits. And he was not there to apologize. He was there to beg for help. The receptionist hesitated when she saw the tall man in a wrinkled shirt, stripped of the polished image of the gym entrepreneur who once flaunted his physique online. But Nathan had already seen him through the frosted glass of his office and instructed that Grant be let in. The door closed, leaving the two men alone, one standing on opposite sides of the same chessboard. Grant's shoulders sagged, his ego deflated like a punctured balloon. "I need your help," he said, his voice hoarse. "They are preparing to prosecute. I could be facing prison time." Nathan observed him quietly. There was no lingering anger in his mind, now only analysis. Grant was no longer an opponent. He was a consequence. "You think I am going to save you?" Nathan asked softly, his tone calm but cutting. Grant swallowed hard. He had once believed Nathan was nothing more than a wealthy crisis consultant who lacked spine. He had believed he could take another man's wife without consequence. Now he understood the magnitude of that miscalculation. Nathan was not just someone who managed crises. He was someone who designed them. Grant claimed he had information that during the investigation, he had uncovered financial partners connected to a larger money laundering network. If Nathan agreed to help, he would hand over everything. An offer of exchange. Nathan walked to the window, watching rain strike the glass. He remembered the long nights of gathering evidence, the strategic calls, the moves calculated 15 steps ahead. He had not done all that to become the savior of the man who once laughed behind his back. But he also did not act out of emotion. Turning back, his expression steady, he said, "You do not need me to save you. You need me to reduce the damage." Grant fell silent because he knew it was true. The twist Grant never anticipated was this. Nathan already knew about the laundering network. In protecting himself, he had uncovered overlapping financial trails. He had not made them public because it was not yet necessary, but he had preserved every file in a private safe. Grant believed he held leverage. In reality, he was merely confirming what Nathan already understood. "I can arrange for you to cooperate with investigators in a way that mitigates your sentence," Nathan said slowly. "But you will do it on my terms." Grant looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "What terms?" "You will publicly admit your actions. No shifting blame. No dragging others down to save yourself. You will accept responsibility." Grant hesitated. Survival instinct told him to agree. The remnants of his pride resisted. Nathan saw the internal struggle clearly. He understood it well. 3 months earlier, Mia had faced the same choice to admit and accept consequences, or to evade them. The difference was that Nathan had not offered her a second chance. With Grant, he offered one. Not out of mercy, but strategy. A controlled collaborator is more useful than a desperate and reckless man. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. Grant left with sealed documents and a clear set of instructions. Nathan remained alone in the room, a strange feeling settling in his mind. He was no longer angry. He no longer wanted to crush anyone. He wanted order. That evening, when Claire noticed his thoughtful mood and asked why Nathan gave her a brief account, without detail, without pride, Claire listened, then asked a simple question. Did you help him because you are good, or because you control the situation? Nathan considered it. Because I do not allow chaos to spread, he replied. Claire smiled gently. That is the difference between strength and revenge. Nathan understood. He had once been underestimated, dismissed as a man, too focused on work, lacking passion. Yet that same cold discipline had protected him. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing streaks of dust from the glass. Grant would face the courts. Mia would continue her modest life. Nathan did not control their futures. He controlled only his response. And in a world where emotion easily derails judgment, that ability is real power. He did not need to shout to prove his strength. He only needed to stand firm, remain silent, and stay 3 steps ahead. That is how he always wins. On the day Grant was sentenced, Mia was also in the courtroom. No one knew she was sitting in the last row, quiet as a shadow. The sentence of 3 years in prison was read in a heavy silence. Grant lowered his head, his shoulders collapsing inward. The man who once walked into his gym like a king now stood under cold white lights that exposed every mistake. Mia looked at him and no longer recognized the man who once convinced her he was real passion. She had once thought Nathan was dry cold, lacking fire. Now she understood that fire does not always warm. Some flames only burn everything down. On the other side of the city, Nathan was not in court. He did not need to witness the ending. He had seen it long ago. He was standing in a conference room at a major technology corporation, preparing to sign a consulting contract worth $4.3 million. Members of the board whispered that they were fortunate to have him. A young executive in the room quietly asked, "Is he really as good as they say?" The chairman responded simply, "He is not good. He is precise." The real twist of that day was not Grant's sentence. It was the fact that Nathan had been the one to propose the cooperation mechanism, with investigators turning Grant from an adversary into a controllable asset. Not to save him, to close the circle. Mia left the courthouse in the rain. Cold drops fell onto her hair, her shoulders, her thin jacket. She was not carrying an umbrella, not because she forgot, but because she did not feel the need. She walked slowly through the parking lot, her heart heavy as stone. She remembered the early days with Nathan, when he was still an unknown crisis consultant. When her friends whispered that he was not exciting, that she deserved someone more intense. She had believed them. She had underestimated stillness. She had not understood that the quietest man in the room is often the one calculating the most. That evening, Mia sent a message not to Nathan, but to herself. It is time to take responsibility. She began enrolling in evening courses on retail management, not to impress anyone, not to prove anything, but because for the first time in years, she understood that freedom does not come from leaning on someone else. It comes from standing on your own. In another part of the city, Nathan returned home after the signing. Claire was sitting in the living room, warm yellow light reflecting in her hair. He told her briefly that Grant had been sentenced. There was no gloating, no coldness, just information. Claire looked at him for a long moment. "Do you feel anything?" she asked. Nathan considered the question. He did not feel joy. He did not feel sadness. He felt completion. Completion not because someone else had fallen, but because he had refused to let the story drag into another chapter of chaos. He had once been underestimated, labeled a man without emotion, obsessed with contracts and strategy. Yet it was precisely his ability to separate emotion from decision that had saved him. In the courtroom, Grant realized something too late. The man he had once dismissed was the only one who offered him a controlled way out. In her small apartment, Mia realized something else. The man she had left behind had never been weak. He simply never displayed his strength. 3 people, 3 different paths, but one shared lesson. Real strength is not about crushing others. It is about controlling yourself when everything collapses. That night, Nathan stood by the window, looking at the city lights. There was no need to prove anything, no desire to witness anyone else's consequences. He had moved through the storm not because of luck, but because of discipline. And when people asked why he never lost his composure, he simply smiled. Because I prepare before anyone else realizes there is a crisis. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside that house, everything had settled into place, quiet, steady, a kind of strength few people understand the value of until they have lost it. 3 years later, Mia stood in front of Nathan's new house, and she was no longer the woman who had once walked away in the rain. She did not ring the doorbell immediately. Her hand hovered in the air, her heart pounding, as if time had reversed to that morning, at 12 years ago. The house before her was completely different from the old one. Bright walls, a carefully trimmed garden, no trace of the memories she once knew by heart. The door opened before she could press the bell. Claire stood there. The 2 women's eyes met for a moment longer than usual. There was no hostility, no jealousy, just 2 versions of 2 different choices. Nathan appeared behind Claire, calm as always. He was not surprised. He had known Mia would come. The final twist was not reconciliation. It was transformation. Mia had not come to ask to return, not to accuse. She came to say thank you. Thank you for not saving me. She said, her voice steady, though something deep within still trembled. Nathan looked at her without defensiveness, without softness. He realized she was no longer the woman from 3 years ago. Her eyes were no longer searching for rescue. They were searching for responsibility. She spoke about the years that had passed, about her new job, about studying at night, about rebuilding her self-worth from broken pieces. She did not deny her mistakes. She did not justify. She did not blame. Claire listened carefully. She understood the value of facing truth. Nathan felt something unexpected. Not joy, not regret, completion. He once believed victory meant protecting assets, reputation, structure. Now he understood that true victory is when the person who once hurt you no longer makes your heart shift. Mia left at sunset, no rain, no tears. She stepped down the front stairs with steadier feet. She did not need Nathan back. She needed to know she had changed. The door closed gently. In the living room, Claire looked at Nathan. "Do you see it?" she asked. Nathan nodded. "She has grown. Not everyone chooses growth after falling. Some sink into bitterness. Some blame fate. Mia chose differently. Night settled. Nathan stood by the window watching the city lights shimmer. He remembered the entire journey from the morning. He discovered the message to the calculated strategies, to the courtrooms, the contracts worth $4.3 million, the quiet reconstruction. He had once been underestimated, labeled a dry man obsessed with contracts and clauses. Yet it was that composure that saved him. He did not win because he was cold. He won because he refused to let emotion destroy his structure. Claire stepped beside him, placing her hand on his shoulder. No dramatic words, just presence. 3 years earlier, Nathan had stood alone in his old kitchen, staring at a glowing phone screen, feeling his world tilt. 3 years later, he stood steady. Not because he controlled others, but because he controlled himself. Somewhere else in the city, Mia sat in a larger apartment than before, opening her laptop to continue drafting her own small business plan. She was no longer searching for someone to lean on. She smiled faintly. Life is not a fairy tale where love always conquers all. It is a series of choices and consequences. Nathan chose discipline over resentment. Mia chose responsibility over escape. Grant learned his lesson after 3 years behind bars. Each paid their price in different ways. The story does not end with tears in the rain. It ends with growth. And if you are standing in a moment like Nathan once did, when everything collapses with a single message, remember this. You cannot control betrayal, but you can always control your response. If this story resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Would you choose forgiveness or clear boundaries? And do not forget to follow the channel for more stories about how people rise after heartbreak, stronger, wiser, and never underestimating themselves again.